It is a time of the hour, so let me welcome everybody. Let me welcome you to the Future Trends Forum. My name is Brian Alexander. I'm your host, the creator of the forum, and your cat herder for the next hour. I'm very glad to see so many people here for one of my favorite people as a guest. Now, before we go further, before we dive in, let me just take a minute to explain the forum and to describe where it comes from and how it works. So if you haven't had a chance to experience this before, the Future Trends Forum is a discussion-based space where we converse with people from around the world to try to explore where higher education is going. Now, the forum came out of a publication called the Future Trends in Technology and Education Report, or FTTE. If you haven't seen that, that's a regular trends analysis that once a month publishes research on major trends that are reshaping education and technology. If you haven't had a chance to explore it, just go to ftte.us. You can download a few sample issues and subscribe if you like. But that's a publication, a one-way publication, whereas the forum is designed to be a place for conversation and discussion between a diverse group of people. Now, the forum and the FTTE report both fall under the header of the Future of Education Observatory. If you haven't seen that, that's a multimedia, ongoing, participatory effort to try to grapple with the future of education and technology. So it includes publications like the FTTE report. It includes this Future Trends forum. It also includes a blog. It includes a bookstore, an online book club, and more. If you haven't had a chance to see that yet, just go to futureofeducation.us and you can find out more. Now, we can only do this work with the help of some very generous supporters, and we'd like to thank them before we proceed. So to begin with, I'd like to thank NYSERNet from New York State. This is a nonprofit that helps that state's colleges and universities not just get online with broadband internet, but do great stuff together collaboratively through those networks. NYSERNet does important work, and we're very grateful to them for their generous sponsorship. We're also grateful to Shindig, because as you can tell, Shindig makes available the technology we're using right now. So if you haven't seen it before, or if you haven't seen it for a while, let me just walk you through it so you can see how it works. Now, where I am right now, and where this slide is just for a second, is called the stage. And it's called the stage because everyone here, the 64 or 65 people, can see and hear everything that comes on up here. Start with the left. You'll see a number, right now it's 72, and the silhouettes of human heads. If you click on that, up will pop two different windows. The one on the left will give you a kind of film strip view of people. So you can mouse over them and get more information about them. So you can see, say, Kirk Ann, and he is the Director of Research Technology Strategic Projects at SUNY Geneseo. Now, to the right, you'll see a chat box. And the chat box is for the people who have just come in and logged in about the same time as you. The chat boxes are usually limited to about 20 people at a time. So we have about 3 or 4 of those boxes open right now. And the chat boxes are great ways for people to have conversations. Often people share links to resources that have come up. Sometimes they start to float questions. Sometimes they just get to know each other. So the chat box is one way to participate. Now, back to that white strip menu. Next to the chat box button, you'll see a question mark with a circle around it. If you click that, up will pop a little box and you can type in a question or a comment that you'd like to share. So when you do that, when the time is ready, I'll flash it on the screen so everyone can see it, and I'll read it out loud so everyone can hear it. Now, next to that question mark button, you'll see what looks like a raised hand. If you click that button, that tells us that you're ready to join us up here on stage. So again, if your microphone is working and your camera is working, and you're in a space where you can talk out loud without interruption, such as if you're in an office, for example, then press that button. And when the time is ready, we'll beam you up on stage and you can join Professor Davidson and I for a conversation. It's actually easier to do than it is for me to describe. And you'll be able to do this pretty well. And those of you will encourage you to do so. So through video or through text or through chat, you can communicate, share questions. If you haven't done this before, you'll see how it goes. It's very smooth and very easy. Now, on top of that, if you're a Twitter user, if you'd like to tweet at the world or tweet questions or comments or observations or screen captures, all of which people do, just use the hashtag FTTE. You can tweet at myself. I'm Brian Alexander. Or you can tweet at this week's guest, Cathy N. Davidson, and we'll be glad to hear your thoughts. So all this is the technology that makes this conversation happen, and we're very grateful to Shindig for letting us use it. Now, we'd also like to thank our supporters on Patreon. And if you don't know Patreon, it's a crowdfunding site like Kickstarter or GoFundMe. And this lets people support people making creative stuff. In this case, it supports us making this work on the future of education technology. And you can see from this list that we have more than 110 people supporting us. In fact, some people support us very generously. And I want to give a shout out to folks like Matthew P. Henry, Sean Summer, Michael Slade, William O'Shea, Bob Johnson, Kyle Johnson, Kristen Eshleman, Corey Yes, Hugh Blackmer, Laura Armour. You can see a whole ton of folks here. We'd be glad to have you join them if you can. For as little as $1 a month, you can help keep the lights on, the machines humming, and all the emails flowing. Just go to patreon.com/Brian Alexander. We're really grateful to all of our Patreon supporters for their help. So that's who supports the Future Trends Forum. That's where it came from. That's how the technology works. Now, let me just introduce you to this week's guest. I am just delighted to welcome Cathy Davidson. Cathy is one of the best-known people writing about the future of education anywhere on earth. She's a distinguished professor and director of the Futures Initiative at the City University of New York. She publishes what seems to be about a book every 6 months, books that are mind-blowing, accessible, entertaining, thought-provoking, books which reshape the conversation about higher education and where it's headed. So right now, I have to say, I'm just delighted to have her available. I'm really grateful for her to take the time for today. I'm really looking forward to the questions that you will have for her. So without any further ado, let me beam Professor Davidson up on the stage.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome. So glad to see you. Where did we find you today?
I am in my office on Fifth Avenue. If I were to cross the street, I'd be at the Empire State Building, elbowing the crowds to go see something or other on a very cloudy, rainy day.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Are you, I'm glad that you're inside and avoiding the rain.
Yes, exactly. Great day.
Well, thank you so much for making the time. I have so many things to ask you. And the first is, looking ahead to the next 11 months, what's ahead for you in 2019? What are you going to be working on? What's going to be occupying most of your brain and most of your time?
What is occupying most of my brain now kind of surprises people. I'm writing a science fiction trilogy.
Fantastic!
Having written, I don't know, a lot of books, nonfiction books, I really feel that our world requires a dystopia, and it's called the Force of Nature trilogy, and it's set after World War III, on the verge of World War IV, where the gnolls, the most despised people on Earth, and the non-human animals have decided if they don't take back the planet, there won't be one. And to give away a big plot device, the heroes in it are bacteria that originated 350 million years ago at the Great Oxidation Event.
Whoa.
I'm having so much fun. It's so much fun. And yes, it's an education book. Yes, it's an education book because they have to teach people how to live again.
That is amazing. I've never heard anything like this.
I'm having a blast. I am really
you must be. You must be. Wow. And I'm so glad to hear that here. Friends, on the forum, we've had a long-standing love affair with science fiction in all kinds of ways. We've had several science fiction authors as guests, like Cory Doctorow. Our book club has read science fiction. And I just found out now we have another science fiction author here to add to our roster.
I don't know if I'm a good one, but I'm sure having fun.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Well, good luck. Good luck. Who's the publisher?
It's with my agent right now. She's reading it for the first time, and then a well-known science fiction writer is reading it right now and giving me some feedback, and I hope to have it go out to publishers sometime this spring. We'll see. It might just be a book for me, or I might publish it on my own, or it might be a thing. We'll see. We'll see.
Well, I'm sure it'll be a thing, and I'm looking forward to it. So let me ask a question. Well, that completely surprises me, and I'm delighted.
I'm so glad I got to surprise Brian Alexander.
Well, it does happen in all kinds of ways. And what is, this will give us new insights into how you think about where education is going. As a professor, as a writer, I mean, what are you seeing ahead? I mean, in terms of the big picture, are you seeing a kind of renaissance of creativity in teaching and learning? Are you seeing us reshaping education based on the findings of science, as in the book you wrote 2 books ago? I mean, what are some of the big picture changes that we should be anticipating?
To quote Dickens, I think it's the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times is students today. Whenever I try to do some kind of event once a week, and I always insist that students are part of the event. And students today want more. They're creative. We've got lots of statistics on this generation. They read more than
Yeah.
any other generation since World War II when they started keeping those records. They're engaged and they know that the education that they've had in K through 12 has failed them. Nobody thinks
Mm.
doing well on an SAT test shows that they're going to be prepared for the world they live in. And they've
Right.
had so much of their education be funneled towards that. They want more, and when they're offered more, they take it. So, as I think you know, Brian, every time I do a talk, I also do some kind of audience interactive. Students are all over it. I mean, if students can contribute ideas and work collaboratively, they are so happy. So that's the best of times is the students. I would
Mm.
say also I'm meeting teachers, professors everywhere who are revaluing the importance of teaching, not over research, but of the collective synergy and creativity of taking research and translating it into teaching, taking teaching and translating it into research. But a real new, um, urgent emphasis on teaching, which I think is long, long overdue. But I think it's partly because everybody's depressed right now, and teaching, it's hard to be depressed if you really are engaged with young people. It's just,
Agreed.
they didn't make this world. They didn't do get this to this world to this situation, and they want to make sure that there's a world for them to live in, so they have a kind of an activism and an energy which is partly about being young and partly about being really annoyed they've inherited this world and they want it to be better. So teaching puts you in touch
Mm.
kind of with your better self, which I think is great.
I agree.
The worst of
And
times,
so many,
cutbacks, 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 vilification of higher education is totally bogus. The people who say there's all kinds of billionaires saying that higher education isn't worth it anymore.
right.
A study done by Raj Chetty in 2015 showed a line, a rare line in statistics that really goes like this from the poorest Americans to the richest Americans. And what correlates with it is participation in higher education. If you're in the top 5%, over 92% of your children are going to
Right.
college. So the
Right.
same rich people that are saying you don't need higher education anymore, higher education isn't worth it, are sending their kids to cram schools to get their kids into the
Mhm.
most expensive schools in the country. So that's just a
Mhm.
lie. That is just a lie. It's bogus. Anyone who can knows that higher education makes a difference in people's lives. And one just number, I have a partnership. My program has a partnership with LaGuardia Community College. Half the average income at LaGuardia Community College, family income coming into college, is $25,000 a year. You get a nurse
Mm.
in the city of New York, your starting salary is $75,000 a year. If you don't think that's life changing to go from
Yeah.
25,000 to 75,000, you just don't know what it's like to be that poor. Also, the number
Mm.
one college or university in the whole Northeast for philosophy majors, LaGuardia Community College. Philosophy is a life tool. So it's not career versus higher creative thinking. Those things go together. You need both. And I'm seeing that in wonderful places.
Well, they do fantastic work in LaGuardia. Um,
Oh my gosh, it's an amazing place. It's really an
how do
amazing.
you how do you grapple with the fact that the rising generation of young people is so amazing, and I agree completely, and yet so many people hate them. It's just a popular sport to call millennials and Generation Z, accuse them of killing the economy and all this. I mean,
Well,
I'm just amazed at them.
I'm amazed, and I think some of it is guilt. I mean, look at the world.
Mm,
How have we
mm.
handled any of the major problems we're facing as a world responsibly? I mean, whether it's
So we just
immigration,
project it on them.
or
Yeah.
the environment, we've really done a pretty terrible job. I mean, and it's easier to blame young people than to say, "Oops, you weren't even born when we did this." So I think there's a certain amount of scapegoating, traditional, old-fashioned, Homeric scapegoating.
Indeed, indeed. Let me, before I just take over completely, let me ask everybody, this is the time when you can start submitting your questions and your comments right now. And by everybody, I mean there's 101 of you. So please
Wow,
just,
101 of you. Thank you for being here. That means you care about education. And
indeed,
that's the best of times, is so many people care.
indeed. So just go down to the menu options at the bottom. And if you would like to join us here on stage, And to sip our various drinks, you can do that by clicking the raised hand to do that on video. If you'd like to enter a text question or a comment, just click that circle. Or if you want, use your chat box and type in comments there. We'd love to hear more from you, especially either from students of Cathy's or people who've read her books, or people who are just curious about what we've been talking about. And while people are fuming and thinking and coming up with their own questions, let me ask a question then about about cutbacks. It seems like across the country, according to the work of Chris Newfield and others, that public institutions have been defunded massively by their state governments. Now, New York seems to have kind of come to a different approach recently with the Excelsior program, which is not quite a free tuition program, but definitely helpful. Do you think we'll see more and more of that kind of a return to public support for higher ed?
Yeah, there's critics and admirers of the Excelsior program. It basically offers free tuition to CUNY or SUNY for anyone who makes less than $150,000 a year. At many of our CUNY schools and SUNY schools, forget $150,000, it's $25,000 a year. So we're talking about expanding tuition free to the middle class. There's nothing wrong with that if it comes along with increased expenditures for the university. And many of our campuses have buckets in the halls to catch the rain, and way overworked professors and adjunct professors, and no advising for students, not because people don't want to, but there's just no funding. The frills are gone, and not even frills, the essentials are gone. And that's true of many, many state universities right now. So, for example, when people say it's deplorable that the graduation rate is 50% from higher education is 50%. Well, I used to teach at a very elite private university where the graduation rate was about 96%. If you have several advisors focusing their attention on students, if students live on campus, if there's many pleasures and pastimes available to students, from sports to fraternities to parties, et cetera, arts, all kinds of things. If you have advisors, and if students aren't working full time, they should graduate. 96% of them should graduate. And it pays the university, a tuition-dependent private university, for those students to graduate. You have more quick alumni out there, et cetera, et cetera. If, like the majority, 40% of students today work full-time and go to school full-time. To me, they deserve a Purple Heart. Anyone who can work and go to school full-time with little advising help, with all the problems facing higher education, deserves a Purple Heart. That, to me, is very brave. We humans are terrible at volunteerism. If you've ever been to the gym, you know that. The business model of a gym is that you pay your year in advance in January, and you don't show up after February 1st. If we all showed up after February 1st, gyms would go bankrupt. They're not big enough for all of that. We're bad at carrying out our voluntary activity. And college is voluntary, and people do it. That to me is a miracle that people make that choice in their lives.
At such scale, too.
Yeah.
Well, we have a whole slew of questions that just come in, and so I'm gonna bring these up right now. Let me see if I can do this correctly. So our first question has come in from, let's see, this is from Peter Shea. Hello, Peter. He asks, how can instructional designers demonstrate to colleges the value they bring to the organization? How do they create an important role for themselves as essential members of the change management team?
That is such a great question. And Peter, I really appreciate your asking it. And you have a long road to hoe for two reasons. One, if you've read my book, there's a chapter on technophilia. It's thinking love of technology. Technology is going to solve all of our problems. And there's a chapter on technophobia. Technology has ruined humanity as we know it. And as an instructional designer, and I assume as an instructional designer, you also mean somehow using technology as part of that instruction. I don't know if I can see you, Peter, but if I'm off track, let us know somehow. Type that. Is that possible to let us know if that's wrong?
Yeah. Well, he's the director of professional development for Middlesex Community College.
So that may not be technology. It might be technology. It might also be teacher training. Teacher training is an easy one because we have so much research that shows that the biggest determinant of whether you do well in learning to be a better teacher is being willing to learn how to be a better teacher. In other words, the first step is willing to admit to yourself
Mm.
that you're not a perfect teacher and to go to somebody for help. And there's some really simple techniques that you can do to make yourself a better teacher. I mean, how to make a better syllabus, how to ask questions better, how to use inventory methods rather than selectivity methods in a classroom,
Mm.
um, how to follow up and repeat what you've said in an orderly way, how to roll yourself in, restrain yourself if you're a disorganized teacher, all of those things. Peter, can Peter comment?
I can't get him. I'm trying to get him to come up on stage, but I'm having a connection problem right now. So I can't get him. But
talks about professional development or technology or both or either. So
I think you gave a terrific part of the answer right there.
The problem with technology development is people have been sold so much bad technology and so much technology that seemed as if it was going to be good for collaboration and in fact was excellent at surveillance and not so good at collaboration. So there's a big distrust factor. Is that Peter?
This is Peter. Can you hear us? Okay, Peter. There's always a question of bandwidth, and if we can get people in. Let's give him one more second here. Hello, Peter. Can you see us and hear us? You may be having a connection issue. We'll give him a shot.
I hope those answers are useful, even if if we don't get to hear from Peter.
Well, it was a great question, and the answers are useful, I think, for everybody. And you'll have other questions along that. So right now, Peter's swapping machines.
So when I talk to people about teaching and do professional development workshops, as I do a lot, often the biggest thing is to make people not feel ashamed of not being a perfect teacher and to talk about it being a process and that we're constantly learning.
That's hard.
So I'm using exactly the same techniques I use in the classroom with active learning. I use with professors who want to be better teachers. Because nobody has ever learned well by being told they're stupid or an idiot or terrible or a tyrant or a space cadet or any of the other things teachers say about students or the world says about teachers.
Peter, are you able to hear us and see us okay? Okay, you're muted, though. You have to unmute yourself.
How about now, Brian? Can you hear me?
Yay!
Perfect. Welcome.
Love technology. And thank you for the answers. They really were very informative, and I appreciate them. And again, I worked as an instructional designer for many years, and then I segued into professional development for faculty and staff. So it's an extension of my original role. But I lead a large group of a community of instructional designers in education, and we're always reading white papers on instructional designers are going to become important in the next 5 years, and then another 5 years, and then somehow we don't quite get in yet in terms of being able to make significant changes. And I think a lot of people in instructional design and higher education feel they could contribute a lot more, but their full skill set isn't tapped because they don't fit completely well into the existing model of what education is. Right. Many of our faculty don't even know what we do.
Exactly. And when you say instructional designer, people freak out. Yeah. And I think often I have to creep up on people and creep up on every fears. I mean, this is again about good teaching too. Where I meet with people and I say, what do you want? Doesn't seem like it's so hard. And I always use index cards and pencils because technology is always failing, especially at the most high-tech places. And have people write out like 3 things I wish I did better in my job. And then I have them share it with another audience member and then come up with one thing they want to share with the group. And when a whole room of people suddenly thinks they have shared issues, they don't feel so ashamed and they're much more willing to talk and come forward and get in. So I usually do that as a warm-up, and then I start going into some techniques and talking about what people can do in their own classrooms, in their own lives, and move forward with that. But I always start with them rather than me. If I come in with something prepared, it never works. In the same way that students don't ever read the syllabus, but they do if they're actually creating the syllabus, then they read it very, very well.
Very carefully.
So partly it's about a delivery model, and that very phrase delivery model starts everything off on the wrong track. If it's a delivery model, it's not interactive and people run away. But good luck. What you're doing is important work, and I know you have a long road to hoe.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Peter. And what a
Thanks,
great,
Brian.
Passionate answer for a really deep question. Let's see if we have other people who want to join us. So let's see if we can have Joyce Ogburn.
Another thing to Peter. When I became a vice
Please.
provost, I had never been an administrator before, so I immediately started taking management classes, and was shocked to find out almost nobody in the university has ever taken management classes. People thought I was a genius. I wasn't. I'd taken like Management 101. But there are so many prescriptions against, restrictions and prohibitions against it that many people don't take advantage of those things. Similarly, before I taught a MOOC, and I still take MOOCs all the time, because I don't believe you should criticize something without participating in it. But it's not the culture of academia. So trying to figure out what the culture is, and like any visitor to a foreign land, figuring out how to navigate within this culture is an essential survival skill for any kind of education.
Oh, that's a good point. I can't think of anybody who's done that outside of people who are, outside people who are in business.
It's true.
We have a whole stack of questions. Let me bring these up. We have one from Joyce Ogburn from Appalachian State, a wonderful librarian, Joyce. And she asks, how might digital literacy help us educate and navigate the future, or the present for that matter? And do students want more help in this area? Great question, Joyce.
Another one of those best of times, worst of time situations where we're having to work against 10 years of really, really bad cramming digital everything down students' throats. And students both are turned off by it and think that they often will think they know everything, and also are sick of people assuming they know everything. So we have a whole bunch of prejudices to work against. I personally think it's not even digital literacy anymore. It's almost like defensive driving for a digital age. Learning how to navigate in this world of what a recent scholar has called surveillance capitalism, which and I'm completely blanking on the name, a very famous book and somebody I've read a lot. Anyway.
Zuboff.
Yes, thank you. Zuboff, who teaches in Harvard Business School. And she says that surveillance capitalism is exactly like GM's managerial capitalism in the 19th century. And it is pervasive as a philosophy all the way down. Including a business model for places like Google and Facebook that it's not an add-on, it's the business model to steal your data and save it and sell it for profit. I mean, that's the advertising model that we're talking about in much of our software and many of the tools we use. I think digital literacy, we should have reading, writing, arithmetic, and digital literacy as the 4 foundational skills. But I also believe every class should have some component that's an online public component where students learn what it means to be anonymous, what it means to be pseudonymous, what it means to put your name out there, what it means to control your data, what is open source, what are the privacy restrictions. I often have students sign up for a website, and then I give them a little pop quiz on what they just signed up for. No one knows, and I feel that no human knows. There was a famous experiment some years ago where people came up with a privacy statement that in the first sentence said, I'm now giving my firstborn child to the owners of this website. 95% of people clicked that they would do that. I mean, we don't read that. So you're having to teach people against the thing that we have learned, not by accident, that's become invisible because it's profitable. The more invisible it is, the more profitable it is. The more we think about privacy and security, the less likely we are to use it, and to use it promiscuously in a way that hurts us. So we're working against the culture. You have to be a little bit of an evangel, and I think project-based digital literacy works best. Rather than lecturing people and screaming at people about how everything's being stolen, actually involving students in a project where they have to design their own privacy rules. In fact, that was done recently at some. I can't remember who it is now. I saw this recently on Twitter. Might have even been IBM that had a large group of students say, if you could make your own rules for privacy, what would they be? Any of us watching this on this video right now, on this website right now, would be proud to have crafted the rules that this group of high school students came up with. It's about offering the opportunity for students to do that. And again, similar advice to what I said before. I'm going to be a broken record here. Make sure you're not telling students, but that they're involved in the process of creating their own digital literacy.
That's a fantastic answer. to a great question. Thank you, Joyce, for that great question
Right.
from the literacy world. And we have another question that I think builds on that. And this is a follow-up from Chris Sessoms, who asks, in what ways can colleges build stronger relationships with students across their lifetime? So i.e. after they graduate.
Well, let's just say private schools that are tuition dependent do a pretty good job of that, not always in the best way.
Mm.
I wish, just so that, so that was the cynical answer, meaning they need people to contribute money in order for them to survive. I wish that when you graduated, you were given like a Monopoly game pass that said you could come back to the university and sit in on courses. You could sit in on online courses, that you would forever in your life get an alumni discount on services and courses available to you, and that was something that was pushed as hard and as fervently as please give us your money. In other words, that it isn't just an alumni magazine that comes twice a year or once a year that shows the glories of people you didn't much like when you were students together. That was another very cynical thing I said. But
Ouch.
it actually says to you, this is still your college and we want you. We need your input. We'd love you to mentor students. We'd love you to offer internships to our students. We'd love you to offer advice to our students. We'd love you to sit on review boards where students could send you resumes and you could say, nope, that wouldn't cut it in my field. We'd love you to be an active, engaged alumni squadron out there that would help our students navigate the world they're living in. And wow, I'm a broken record. That's exactly like digital literacy. Don't just tell alumni something, get alumni involved. Ask for their services. See how alumni can be involved with students today and how that can be a mutually beneficial relationship. Don't just ask for pocketbooks, but also ask for talent and caring and concerning. It'll be automatically a sort of those who are interested and who have something to offer. But there's many, many possibilities, especially older Americans. At the very end of life, there are a lot of people, retired people, who would like to contribute in some way.
What did you think of the that new Arizona State University program where they have a dorm on campus for seniors, senior citizens, not senior citizens?
Yeah, it's fantastic. Everything I've read, and I did that for Now You See It, everything I've read about co-learning situations of young people and old people, of animals and old people, of animals and young people, cross species, cross generation, cross cultures, it works. I mean, I think it's a great thing. A tiny project we did here a while ago, we found out one of our campuses had the first language spoken in the homes of the majority of students was Russian. Second was Spanish. Third was English, demographically. And we had no Russian classes whatsoever at this community college. And it's no longer existing. So I'm being careful about the name of the program. It only lasted a few years. It just needed a faculty and advisor, and that person moved on. But we had some grandmas who would come and teach heritage Russian to some of the students. It turned out to be tremendously valuable for everybody. And somebody who thought they were, the phrases people used about themselves were so sad. One woman said, "I'm just a stupid immigrant. I barely know English," and suddenly she was a professor. And it was a great program for everybody. And it felt good. Plus, she was a great baker, so she would bring cookies and stuff. So it always helps when you're a college student if there's a Erzat's grandma who brings you cookies.
Well, Russian grandmothers make the whole country work. Well, thank you for that great answer. Again, that sense of interactive, of actually engaging people. We have another question about time that comes from Gordon Dalby, but in a different direction. Gordon asks, when will the U.S. and others abandon the agrarian school year, especially with the advent of augmentation technologies? What will be the great gains in U.S. higher ed if pre-K through 12 educators are employed 12 months rather than 8 or 9?
Well, if the whole world would go to a 12-month-a-year calendar, it certainly would help, especially working mothers. I have the privilege and the honor to work with a number of brilliant young professionals who have young children, and summer is tough. I mean, nothing is set up for working mothers. I mean, it is very, very hard to have a job outside the home and to raise children at the same time. I mean, but the summer months are especially challenging. So that's one thing that would be solved. For many students and universities, filling dorms year-round can turn out to be very, very profitable. I know many students who would much rather go 12 months a year and graduate in 2.5 years or 3 years rather than in 4 years. There are many advantages to it, and I always throw up a what-if slide when I'm giving lectures, and one of them is, what if graduation weren't tied to any kind of academic calendar? What if passing a course weren't tied to Carnegie credit hours? It was just, we're set up in the 1890s by an industrialist designing higher education to be more like an assembly line. I mean, the whole idea that you had credit hours. I mean, Newton would probably is rolling in his grave at the idea that to master a course, you have to sit in a seat and do something for a prescribed number of hours. What does that have to do with learning? So the whole system of time-based learning, whether it's the agrarian summers or it's the 19th century school bell, right?
Right.
The whole point of the 19th century is, how do you teach farmers how to be factory workers? How do you go from a world where if it's raining, you don't go out to the field, you work on your harnesses in the barn. If it's a clear day, you go out when the sun comes up. If the sun goes away, you change. You're constantly making decisions based on the world you live in. That doesn't work in a factory. So everything about our educational system is designed to make you as rigid as a machine, designed to turn learning into a mechanized. 8 to 9 a.m., let's do mathematics. It's 9 o'clock. Doesn't matter if you get it. Doesn't matter if you don't get it. Doesn't matter if you love it. Doesn't matter if you hate it. It's 9 o'clock. Put away your books and get out your geography books. I mean, it's a weird concept of learning that extends to the summer, but it's every part of learning. The more you think about time and education, you realize, are we really teaching content, or are we teaching time management? And I think it's or time control. It's a real issue.
Ouch. And I love the idea of that what if slide. You just opened up everybody's imagination of that. And what a great question, Gordon. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon.
We have another question here. Let me just bring this up. And this is from Jenny Magnus, who asks, the need for more creativity in education has been talked about for years and years. Why has there been so little movement on this in our education curriculum? Why is the curriculum still so focused?
So if you start looking, I've had a sad thing happening lately. Best of times and worst of times. Several boards of trustees have been given copies of the new education to talk about, to try to spur this idea of creativity and looking more into creativity. One thing that happened just this last weekend was all of the trustees of the University of California at Santa Cruz received my book. And at the same time, a lecture from somebody who brought up University of California in Santa Cruz in like 1978. And it kind of is the creative, imaginative, rigorous, but also bold and boldly thinking university that we think of as the university of the future. I don't think that's an accident. I think the cutbacks from education started very overtly when Ronald Reagan became governor of the University of California, and that was the first strategic hit to higher education after the GI Bill and the Great Society that said our future as a nation depends on good education. That was the first cutback when he became president. That was a very major part of his presidential life. At the same time, we started getting more and more emphasis on education as practical, as jobs training, even though every study we have of who succeeds in jobs is creativity, collaboration, multicultural understanding, being able to take something really complicated and explain it to somebody else. All of those skills that are now written off as frills, in fact, are what allow you to advance within a company. It's not basic skills that maybe that gets you a first job, although it usually doesn't even get you a first job, because it inevitably at a job interview you're asked that question. What would you do if? What is the time you failed most? How did you recover? All your avenues are closed. What would you do now? They're all just questions that are based on creativity. Those are the standard issue, again, Management 101, job interview questions. And they're all about creativity. And we're telling students that that no longer counts. I think the cutback education and the skills education go hand in hand. And they're both about demeaning the value of education. You better believe that at the elite institutions, and we know this from K through 12, you go to a rich, you can almost tell if a school, the family income of a school district, K through 12 school district, by how much art, music, dance, travel abroad, all of those things are offered at the school. So it's not frills for the rich. It's only frills for people of modest means.
And this connects back to your earlier point about billionaires saying we don't need higher education, but the real leap comes from the very poorest people.
Exactly.
We have, again, this is what I love about the forum, is that once you all start going, you start going, and questions are coming thick and fast. And we have yet another person who wants to join us up on stage. This is John Gould. And John, welcome from Drexel. I think you're muted. It's okay.
We are. So, yeah, I'm finding your conversation here quite interesting. I've been a superintendent of schools before I enter academia, and at times I feel like it's better to be a superintendent than deal with the politics in a university level. If the Byzantine Empire is alive and well. So what I'm interested in is that when I was a superintendent, I worked on trying to change the structure of the day in school.
Did you say, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Did you say instruction?
No, structure.
Structure.
The structure of the day of school. In one school, believe it or not, I was able to get elementary teachers to go to the school board and ask to have the walls knocked down between their classrooms. And that was in 2003, well after open education. And the point, I think, when you started out talking about K-12 as a failure, I think structurally, yes, it is, because of just what we're talking about. And the relationship between the K-12, like I always hear, what we're trying to do in higher ed, and that the students that we're getting in are not well prepared, et cetera. But there does not seem to be an open discussion of what's the relationship between higher ed and K-12 and the relationship of higher ed and lifelong learning. And that I'm curious about how would you initiate that conversation, because that demands a fundamental shift in the assumptions that we presently use in schools. And it doesn't matter if it's K-12 or university level, because the technology obviously is driving that. As it was stated before, you look at instructional designer, faculty members just get locked into that. They're afraid of it. They don't know what to do with it. It demands a whole different mindset in shifting of how we interact with students, whether it be a virtual environment or face-to-face. So I was curious about what you think we need to really do to generate that conversation at all levels.
So that's a great question. By the way, a friend of mine from many years ago was a superintendent in your part of the world. So I'm be curious if you happen to know Ed Coyle.
Ed who?
Ed Coyle?
Yes. I've been a superintendent in Pennsylvania, yes.
Yep. My last book dealt more with K through 12, and this one with higher education. My pet peeve, I have a lot of pet peeves. One of my pet peeves is when college professors blame K through 12, the poorly trained students on K through 12 teachers, because we've all inherited the same system. The Committee of 10 that was designed to create standards for high schools in America in the 1890s was chaired by Charles Eliot, the 40-year president of Harvard, who completely changed higher education at the same time. So we're all in the same boat. I do think that one of the problems, and this is a connection between higher ed and K through 12, is that we have lost so much of what used to be called vocational education, and so much of K through 12 now is de facto college prep, and college is not for everyone. College is life-changing, but because you don't want to go to college doesn't mean you don't have something tremendously vital, important to add, whether that's as a cosmetologist, or a physical therapy assistant, or EMT, or a auto mechanic, or an artist, or a playwright, where you might not feel you need to go to college. There still should be ways for you to be trained. I have a nephew who, I will say this, no prejudice at all, he's a genius. And from the time he was 6, could do anything with computers. He now is one of the people, if you watch the Super Bowl, there are all these trucks that send out video feeds around the world. My 25-year-old nephew is one of the people that coordinates all of those trucks, all the technology, all the different systems around the world. He hated high school, traditional high school, and his mom doggedly drove him to the one vocational school still in the city of Denver, where he could get a phenomenal education in technology, and he went to a for-profit technology school. That's almost gone in America. In this city of New York, kids are talking about going to pre-college preschools, 4-year-olds going to preschools that help set you on the track for college. That's wrong too. I'm as much against that and much more in favor of a flexible education in high school as I am for a more relevant, flexible education in college. And I think those things are related.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I teach doctoral students and they're part-time students. And it's interesting because they're classroom teachers in K-12. They're also, teachers and administrators at higher ed. And, your comment about creativity is that we integrate into that course design thinking studios to get students to begin to reimagine the possibility of the structure of what schooling should be and the types of assumptions that we're going to have to shift in order that to happen. We utilize a lot of work coming out of the work from Otto Scharmer up at MIT with Theory U as how do you generate the types of conversations? Because even as superintendent, it was amazing. It took me 3 years to get a board and a community to begin to entertain the possibility that these teachers could create that, and we want to multi-age grouping. So, I think the issue we really have to, focus on is that the problem today is we're all products of this system.
Absolutely.
And to change, the fundamental shift in thinking, I think it was Ari Degas who wrote The Living Company back in the 90s, said that we have no memory of the future. So when we do strategic planning, we do all of this stuff. What we end up doing is reimagining the past. Yes. And we think that's what the future is. And I think that's the critical issue that this generation, and I agree with you, is like, I'm getting up there. I'm almost at a quarter century. So as I interact with these younger people, you're right. They are I think committed. The problem is us who are in that framework. How do we begin to understand to do that and to begin to utilize technological tools and to begin to think about rethinking the structure of day and time and work, et cetera. I think that's the critical issue we have to address, make it work.
Could not agree more. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Wonderful. And good to see you here again. Thank you. We have, friends, we are coming close to the end of the hour. So this is the time to get your questions in while you can. In the meantime, John, I'm going to keep you up here on stage just for a minute so that people can see how this works. I want to introduce Autumn Keynes, who is not only the University of Michigan Dearborn, but is also the presiding genius over the Virtually Connecting Project, which connects people at face-to-face conferences with the rest of the world. So welcome, Autumn. So glad to see you.
Thanks, Brian. Can you guys hear me okay?
Perfect.
Beautifully.
Awesome. Yeah, Cathy, we actually got to meet face-to-face, I think, at a digital pedagogy lab a couple of years ago. You did Virtually Connecting with us. It was awesome.
Yes, I recommend you. Good to see you again.
It's great to see you again. So my question is, I feel like technology support for students at colleges and universities a lot of times ends up taking on the support model, right? We've got the help desk and we've got maybe even like a genius bar kind of thing, but it's always like, can you help me with either my personal device or something that the university have given me? But how can we move that model to something that's more consultative, something that's more creative, something that talks about those big pictures of the way that we use technology for creative purposes, but also I think to maybe prepare students for some of these security and privacy issues that you've talked about?
So we've just started a new master's in digital humanities, Master of Arts in digital humanities, and a Master of Science in data analysis and visualization. And I'm on the boards of both of those. And I was just talking to a colleague last night. And one of the projects we have here is a Skillshare, where on certain nights in the library, faculty don't go anywhere near it, and students share skills with one another. And I think that's a tremendously, and we just try to provide some food and some pizza and a lot of technology stuff. I think that's one good model. At Arizona State, I met some people who took that model one step further. And at the end of each Skillshare, people got to do like recommendation systems. There's no negative, but you could give like good badging systems. You don't give a bad badge. You only give a badge to somebody who's really helped you. And there's a whole bunch of badges they could give for people who were most helpful, most creative, push them the most, all kinds of good things. And then they had small prizes that they actually found sponsors for them, but small, iPhone 10 or, some, that's not so small. Here, that would be a major.
No, that's a nice prize. Yeah.
Our students don't have connectivity except for a phone, and often it's not a fancy phone. But something, not something that would bankrupt a university, but something that rewards people. So it could even be at the end of a semester of Skillshares, something like that. And then I like the idea of setting up a project and sometimes offering credit for it, or if not credit, a small honorarium for it. That's a real problem in the university, and inviting students to help solve it. And, like a new tool that you want to deliver to classrooms. What are the obstacles? What are what's the usability? I saw a great phrase recently. Somebody said any new technology that's released shouldn't have just a usability study, but an abusability study. It would be to invite students to do abusability studies of campus software, and to file some kind of report about it, or to have a blog where they wrote, or Twitter or an Instagram or whatever, where they're reporting on it. But again, it's my broken record model. Things that is meaningful, not busy work, but meaningful work. That students can get credit for, because all students know that they need, for this job market, they need some, if not an internship, some plausible credential, if not a badge, a letter of recommendation from the director of a program saying so-and-so did A, B, and C, and we did a brilliant job, but something that they can add that complements the other work they do at the university. But making it fun, making it available, making it count, and making some kind of reward that's both an intrinsic reward of, collective satisfaction, and and possibly an extrinsic reward, just to add that little bump of fun and flair and gamesmanship.
It's interesting you say that, because one of the things I discovered, because of the fact is that the social media and the material that's out there is rapidly changing, because our courses are online generally. And I found that what I encourage students when they're doing their assignments, what I get them to do is to pick the choice of mechanism that they want to use to present that assignment, because it helps them to do that. But more importantly, I think from a teaching point of view, it allows me to understand their world better in terms of the types of tools that they're using, because there's no way as an instructor I can keep up with this stuff unless you're an instructional designer, and even there you might have trouble. So I let the students do it.
Pardon me?
True.
I let the students do it by choosing that to tie their assignments into the use of the technology, which then they benefit and I benefit also.
Autumn,
I
what a great question. That's the subject of a whole hour of conversation, I think.
I know it's a lot.
Thank you. Let me keep all three of you up here just for a minute, because we have one more question that has come up, and we're almost at the end of the hour. And this is from the awesome Kate Borowski, who always has great questions. And she asks, this feels like an impossible how do we change the world kind of question, but how do we begin changing the negative buzz around education so that education gets more support, including dollars?
So, as I said, I do talk once a week, and I write lots of things out there in the mass media. The thing I wrote when I referred to that through line that goes from the poorest to the richest, and how the more money you have, the more likely you are to be able to send your child to college. And if you don't have money, you desperately are trying to send your students to college. That was in the Washington Post. But we all have to be evangelists. I think we all have to use whatever platform we can on behalf of higher education, because the anti-higher education forces are organized. They have an agenda. It is not a good agenda. As you know, the Kochs now are in K through 12, and they want to privatize K through 12 next. This is not innocent. There's a profit motive and a political ideological motive that includes a real ideology that stupid people don't inflict their will on people who want to be corrupt and collude. And that goes all the way back to the Middle Ages and probably to, the cave people. That's an old one where, education is dangerous, right? We know Plato was concerned about that.
Yeah, and the other thing is maybe not to concentrate on getting more money first, but to generate different ideas that then allow that if you generate a buzz about a new way of doing schooling, higher ed, or as I say, lower ed, doesn't matter, that what you do then is set up the framework to then ask the question about the money issue. Because our tendency is we want to keep throwing more money, that we think we need more money, whereas no, we should be generating ideas and then ask, how do we reallocate presently what we have to find out what we might need going forward?
I think that's a great point. I almost never lead with the money. And this series that we have here, the lecture series we have here, is called The University Worth Fighting For. And it's a double-edged, that higher education is a public good, but it also has to be good for the public. And we have a responsibility too. So I always lead with the stories and with the creativity, but I'm also willing to expose a lie. So that piece in the Washington Post is called 4 Lies About Higher Education. And,
right. That was good.
It really looks at the most prevalent lies people tell that have no basis in any kind of data or research we have about them. Yeah. But yes, I don't think it works to just say we need more money. Also, I have to admit, even in the most stressed, I used to be at a very wealthy school. Now I'm at probably the lowest funded school system per capita in the United States. Great ideas don't necessarily cost more money.
Right.
I wish there were so much more money for my students and and the faculty at CUNY. They deserve it so much. They work so hard. It's humbling to teach here. It's every day. I'm utterly humbled at the heroism and the brilliance of the people I get to work with. At the same time, it's often will and creativity and imagination and just willingness to try to reallocate and redo something another way that makes a difference. Yep. But those things go together, and crushing tuition is crushing tuition no matter how you cut it. That's just a problem.
I have to say that's a perfect moment to end on. We're not out of money, but we are out of time. I have to thank all of you in the forum for asking so many great questions.
Amazing.
Autumn, John, all of you for coming up here on stage. I really appreciate that. And Cathy, my gosh, you're such an inspiration, such a torrent of ideas, so much great stuff. I have to ask the last question is, where can people find you? Where can, besides going out and having to get the new education, if they haven't gotten it, what's wrong with you? But where can people keep up with you online?
So I'm on Twitter a lot, and my hashtag is just my name, @Cathy, middle initial N, Davidson. And I I can't say that I always answer on Twitter, but I try. As you know, Brian, I try to answer just about every question on Twitter.
Very
And
good.
because I believe that we all learn from everyone learning, and I learn most of all. So if you have a question, don't hesitate to tweet it at me, and I will try my best to answer when I have a chance.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And which gives me a chance to give a shout out to, my God, let's see, Joe Murphy, Dan Blickensderfer, Lee Finkelstein, George Station, Patricia Prusco, all kinds of people who've been tweeting up a storm during this hour. So
I look forward to
Scott
seeing
Robison. So you'll have to go back and check this out. Quite a few people. Thank you so much, Cathy. Thank you.
It's been a blast. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for caring about education.
Well, my pleasure, and I think our pleasure as well. But don't leave anybody, because we have to tell you about what's coming up on next week. Let me quickly bring up that slide right now so you can all see what the future lies in store for us all. So first of all, again, let me just thank all of you again for fantastic questions and comments. This has just been a masterclass in how to talk and think about the future of education. Next week, on Valentine's Day, we have two guests. We have the awesome John Seeley Brown and the splendid Ann Pendleton Julian. Both writers, thinkers, and activists in the future of education, who will be talking about some new designs and new visions for where teaching and learning could go. Now, we also are getting ready to poll for our new book club, reading. So if this is your last chance to give us suggestions for what kind of readings you'd like to put in. If you're thinking about books, including Professor Davidson's books, go to our bookstore. Just go to brianalexanders.org/bookstore, and you can pick up copies of all kinds of titles. Again, the only bookstore in the future of education. Now, if you want to keep talking about all this stuff, obviously you saw on Twitter there is a whole stream of discussion going on. So use that hashtag FTTE. You can tweet at me at Brian Alexander. You can find us as well, or we have little groups on Slack, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. And you can find Shindig all over the place as well. So in the meantime, let me thank you all so much for all of your attention, for all of your thoughts. This has been fantastic, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.